Thank you, Jacob. I always find everything you say very moving and so echoey with the things I'm going to say in a slightly different way. So lovely to be here with you all and for this opportunity to participate in a collective inquiry. I'm really grateful to be part of it. And my goal here is to share some of my journey, reflect on my work in ways that I hope will stimulate thoughts and feelings, and become part of this vibrant dialogue or building of collective wisdom on being human in criminal justice and beyond. This is really the right point for me to be taking stock and thinking about where I want to focus my energy for the next phase of my professional life. I had to take a pause from a lifetime of prisons research to recover from a kind of existential crisis. So the crisis has many components, but two of its core strands have been first, returning to a once outstanding prison that I'd studied and knew really well after a period of just over 10 years and finding it paralysed by distrust and newly violent. Secondly, watching the whole penal system in England and Wales disintegrate and become unsafe in wholly predictable ways since around 2013, as staffing levels and experience were drastically reduced. And because I measure moral climates, I was inadvertently measuring the moral disintegration and understood its causes all too well. So, as many of you know, this is your work. All violence has devastating and widespread consequences. So I was really fortunate to be granted a Leverhulme Major Research Fellowship in 2020, which came at just the right moment. This has given me some time out to write a book that synthesizes my life's work. And writing the book has been a kind of journey. A friend used the word pilgrimage. It's involved a lot of soul searching as I tried to develop a clear understanding of my work's meaning. And some things shifted in me as I wrote. Several of the chapters were painful as well as therapeutic to write. They raised themes like anger, violence, and shame that I'd been avoiding for most of my professional life. So I wanted to extract from a professional lifetime in prisons research the positive lessons learned. What have I learned about the fundamental processes of human growth and destruction, about the role of different prisons in exposing or repairing vulnerability, in supporting the life force or extinguishing it? And now I've studied prison suicide many times. And in my chapter on the subject, I distinguish between survivable and unsurvivable prisons based on research. I learned that, I quote, the mind is more likely to opt for death, in Camus' words, when our environment is mute or unresponsive, when it lacks meaning and it's devoid of humanity. So a survivable prison is morally intelligible, safe, and respectful. It operates above a certain moral threshold. So I can conclude from my own findings that human beings need to be in environments that treat them fairly, but also as fully alive. So I'd like to read you two short extracts, raise a few of the book's main themes, and then end with a couple of questions to add to Jacob's. So this short section opens the book. It's from the first chapter in which I'm explaining how it began. I'm coming to the end of an extended interview with a prisoner serving a very long sentence. He's in his mid-30s, mixed race, and originally from the same city as me, although we had very different experiences of growing up in it. We shared these experiences both whilst I was working in the prison and subsequently in letters. He has a magnetism, a depth, and an honesty about him. We talked often. Our conversation is deep and it's sometimes emotional. He attended our weekly dialogue group, a largely unstructured and human conversational space for learning and thinking. So we've covered a lot of ground. The group was organised by us, the research team, at the request of a small group of prisoners who knew me from previous projects and came to greet us in the library when we started our fieldwork there. There was a time in my long prisons research life when professional dialogue groups just existed in some high security prisons and we were just invited in. We became knowers of a common spirit, but those days are long gone. So the book opens with his words. It don't make no sense, Alison. He's declaring his emotional and moral discomfort with the world he finds himself in. He's deeply aware of its flaws. Its very conception of what it is to be human is mistaken. His world is full of feeling, including moral feeling about what matters, about how he's seen and treated by others, what Andrew Sayers calls lay normativity. He understands at a deep level that what he experiences as unfair practices in prison are morally inappropriate and damaging. The whole criminal justice system, as he experiences it, feels unjust. His language is binary. His life is confused. The criminal justice's language is binary. His life is confused and tangled. But here he is, stuck and facing a 30-year sentence. Nothing could be clearer or more heartbreaking. So I argue in this first chapter that prisoners undergoing long prison sentences gain deep insight into the density of moral experience. They can get to the heart of the matter in ways that people facing death or near-death experiences often describe. Prisoners sometimes recover a sense of the human that's in danger of being lost in the world outside. So they sense, as Jason illustrated, deeply and knowingly their own personal dignity. Although they prefer to use the words humanity, respect, and fairness, prisoners are strikingly articulate about the meaning in practice of these concepts, often describing their observations and internal states of mind painfully richly. It's a tragic paradox of prison life in long-term high-security prisons that insights as to the texture of moral life can develop so intensely too late. The chapter goes on to talk about the role of human vibrations in experience. I've found some mainly women philosophers and writers who've been talking about human vibrations for over a century, but they've been squeezed out of the academy by sciencey men. But these writers are coming back into fashion, I'm glad to say. So I'm arguing that a long prison sentence is the nearest people get to death without dying. In that sense, prisoners often report near-death-like experiences of revelation or realization of what matters. The absence and then fleeting presence of values we all need, like humanity and kindness, make it crystal clear how much these values matter. This point appears in great literature. So Dostoevsky, a lot of great authors, as you know, have spent time in prison. And Dostoevsky describes losing his faith in humanity in a prison camp, but then finding it again when he experiences a momentary act of kindness. These acts of recognition are clarifying. They keep us alive. So the rest of the book outlines my methodology, including the use of appreciative inquiry. It describes a prison that created anger and violence, but then spends considerable time describing and morally measuring unusual or outstanding prisons that grow the life force. And the main differences between these two extreme poles of human experience align with the work of a theologian philosopher, Martin Buber, who distinguishes between what he calls I-it relations, in which people are treated as experienced objects, and I-thou relations, or environments in which people are seen and treated as experiencing subjects who have complexity and potential, who are always unfolding. So now I characterize different prisons as having either I-it climates, the majority, or I-thou climates, an exceptional few. Prisons in general, and actually I argue the world outside, have hardened into a world of it. And this itness, or the lack of an organic between, extinguishes the life force. This brings me to my second extract, which takes place in an I-thou prison. This prisoner on a special psychologically informed unit describes the experience of being seen and the emotional impact of this after a long period in more difficult places. We're having a conversation together about staff. He says, I find one or two of them that are, sympathetic to me. And I ask, what do they see that others aren't seeing? They see me as a person. They see me crying out for help. Other people don't see that. You know something, there's one in particular, he sees the alterations in my mood. He knows when things are not working out. It takes quite a skill to work that out. And you know what happens? In that situation, that allows me to be myself. So I say, the fact that people are placing trust in you, you're saying that's allowed you to be yourself. Yes, I've never been trusted with anything. Or if I have been trusted with anything, I've abused it. So I ask, how does it feel to be trusted? Difficult. Why is it difficult? Because I'm used to, he starts to struggle for words. I ask, is it new territory? It's new territory, yeah. I'm used to abusing trust. He finishes the sentence. What makes me feel good is that they've acknowledged that I'm honest now. They've wrote it in my reports. You know something? Now when I do something, this is the problem you have when you entrust in other people. When you do wrong, you feel guilty. I never used to have that, but I do now. I've got guilt now, guilt and remorse. I don't know where it's come from, where the source of it's from, but all I know is I feel uncomfortable when I've hurt people. He had access to what I now call moral opportunities in this unit that prisoners in more typical prisons don't have. I think this idea is important. Somebody on this unit was always making cakes. Next time you come on this wing, said my interviewee, stay for tea. The ordinary is often the place where extraordinary things can happen. In another example I won't elaborate on today, a prisoner describes his shock at being trusted with a pair of scissors. He then went on to discover clay in his unit, felt excitement and pleasure, and experienced a new concept of the self. He discovered some of his best qualities: creativity, intelligence, and articulateness. He was aware of a joy that had been missing from his former hard man life. He said, I had stumbled across something within myself. So what is this something within himself? He's describing a kind of life force or vitality, an animating energy or potency, a word that shares the same root as potential. He was both expressing and finding himself. I was experiencing the glory of being alive, he said. Prisoners describe the difference between prisons that create anger, violence, and distress versus the very rare prisons that facilitate growth and development, as like the difference between the desert and an oasis. An oasis is where the wire to the world begins to vibrate. All vulnerable human beings need a kind of presence or attention Rowan Williams refers to in his book, Being Human, as almost reverence. Jacob said sacred. This prisoner above described Bolini, where he was at the time, as a tremendous breakthrough in penology. We had redefined punishment as we knew it. The place was alive, he said. So I didn't know when I set out on this journey that I'd be writing about the difference between life and death, aliveness and devitalization. But that's what's happened as I've combed through my research findings and notebooks. Different prison environments and eras demonstrate different degrees of what I now think of as concern for life. My time is up, I think. Just to say thank you very much. Writing this book has acted as a kind of holding place for me. It's led me to new meeting places for those of us who want to create as well as live in a more human, whole and balanced world. And I'm very much hoping this forum becomes one of those places.